at Laffy_D and at ship my modem DFS. That's what it should be. Not he said ship my router DFS. That's good.
Yeah.
Ship my modem DFS. Sounds a lot better.
I restarted it right before the show, so hopefully can get through this one.
Okay, good. Yeah, that gives you what, like a 45-minute window?
Yeah, we need to talk fast.
All right. We'll move at light speed, unlike your internet. Honestly, though, we're going to get through every game. We always do. And we always spend a good amount of time on everything that needs to be talked about. But there's no question that this is one of those slates where so much happened. And so much happened early in the day, which I was grateful for. I was very grateful that this happened before I finished writing the deep dive. Because you know the feeling of like 3 p.m. rolls around and then you start getting inundated with everything, or you just submit the article and it's all worthless and you spend 4 hours on it. So
yeah,
having
it's
it all
like when you do a 2-hour show in the morning with Josh and then all this stuff comes out right after.
Pretty much. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I did an hour podcast with Dan this morning or last night. And basically what you're doing is you're just hedging you're not hedging like whether or not, so you're right or wrong. You're hedging whether or not someone's going to play, right? So if Giannis plays, here's what you do. If Giannis doesn't play, then here's what you do.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so it's nice to have that news now. We're not really waiting on too much. Like, I guess the rest of a Knicks starting lineup and Luka Doncic, but that's like it.
Yeah, pretty much. Waiting for people to jump in here too, because we started a little bit before 5:00. We'll start with Portland and Indiana. We'll work our way. Damian Lillard's been a monster this season, Adam. And it's funny because you and I both had similar viewpoints on him. Last year, he and John Wall are similar in that Lillard's definitely primary scorer, and then can give you, this in the real nice games, you get like the 7 rebounds, 7 assists, 6 rebounds, 9 assists, something like that. John Wall's one of those guys where in the really good games you get, and Lillard has like 40 points, by the way. And John Wall's one of the guys where you get like 25 points, 9 rebounds, and 15 assists. And that's where his production with the steals. But in terms of like average production over the past few years, they've been pretty similar. I think you'd agree on that. But Lillard this year, you're seeing him even playing quite a bit of minutes alongside McCollum so far, more than last year. The field goal attempts, the usage is through the damn roof. The 3-pointers, double-digit 3-pointers in each of his last 3 games, 20-plus field goal attempts in all but one game, which was not that close. It's just with all of the news that we've already gotten on Giannis and Davis, he's not the easiest guy to fit. I just feel like on another slate, I'd have quite a bit of Lillard, and maybe I'm on an island, but I'm really not, because I can't fit that much of him here.
Right. It's just really tough to prioritize him with all the reasonably high upside, underpriced point guards we have, all the news that we've gotten that increases guys like Kyle Lowry and Eric Bledsoe. And you have Lillard's price tag increasing as well. I mean, obviously, he has a monster ceiling. He's put up 60 fantasy points 2 games in a row. But I just hate paying for a guy who his price increases, like 10% on the back of that, because we're not ever projecting him to consistently do that. And you're kind of just paying a premium on a slate where there's a ton of opportunity cost at the position, I think. So I kind of doubt that I'll end up with much Lillard, not to talk anyone off of it if they can get there, but I just can't see prioritizing him.
Yeah, that's the same thing with me. And as I mentioned, I started writing the deep dive this morning and mentioned Lillard. And then as we got the news, I went back and italicized, like, look, he's a good play, in a vacuum, but not somebody that you can prioritize on this slate. And that's kind of what you said as well. Victor Oladipo, my stance on him. Whenever Depot falls below 8K, particularly on DraftKings, he is firmly on my radar, because I really don't have a problem with a 40-point floor at sub 8K, which is generally what you get from him in decent spots, and we did in each of those last 2 games. At 8,600, though, I'm fine with passing on him tonight.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way about him as I do about Lillard. He's obviously a little bit cheaper, so it's a little bit more palatable, but just stacked guard positions today, and I guess the argument for either of them would be on slates like this. everyone, the chalk is good and everyone knows what it is. And if you're trying to win a large field tournament, you kind of have to make suboptimal plays and, or at least kind of suboptimal roster construction. And if everyone is going to the same handful of guards, that means you're going to get low owned Oladipo, low owned Damian Lillard. And obviously, these guys have the upside to do a lot of damage and be one of the highest scorers on the slate. So that would be the argument for them. But in terms of talking about an optimal lineup, it's just, like, how the hell do you get there?
Exactly. And there's no doubt that that Oladipo and Lillard are both guys that are capable of giving you those monster numbers. But in this spot, their prices aren't where you need it, and it really just comes down to, I look at the value, and by value, there are guys in the 7K range that become value plays, 6K range that are going to see around 30% usage rates today, that are going to see double-digit assist opportunities that are $2,000-$3,000 cheaper than guys like Dame and Oladipo because of their situations on their respective teams. That makes a difference.
Right. It's not like it would be one thing if you had, just to use a quick example, like Kyle Lowry at 8,000 in, obviously a spot without Leonard, and then Oladipo for 600 more. It would be a lot easier to say, okay, I think the ownership probably will be worth it to go to Oladipo. But when you factor in that you also have, guys like Teague and Dennis Smith Jr. possibly playing without Luka Doncic, you have Drew Holiday playing without anyone. You have basically a whole tier of guys who are getting huge boosts in production. Eric Bledsoe, you're not talking about just having to beat Lowry. You're talking about having to beat like 5 or 6 guys that are getting boosts in their productivity.
Yeah. Anything else in this game stand out to you? I know the other day Darren Collison was on your radar, had a strong performance. That was one of those nights, though, that I just would like to never, or that I would like to forget. I know a lot of us felt that way. Atlanta and Chicago came in 50 points or so below the total. Yeah. It was just one of those games where I'm trying to wipe clean of my memory. But anything else from this game? And by the way, I know we keep talking about CJ McCollum too cheap. CJ McCollum too cheap. Yeah, he's too cheap for a guy that's probably going to give you 30 fantasy points.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think CJ McCollum's too cheap. It is worth pointing out, and I have no idea if it'll continue today, but in their last game, they finally staggered his minutes, and Lillard, he got about 8 minutes at point guard. No idea if that'll continue, but it happened, and I think his price tag puts him in play, even if they don't stagger his minutes. But knowing there's at least a possibility that happens again makes me a little more interested. And Yusuf Nurkic is 6,400 in a spot where I expect him to play towards the high end of his minute range. I think he'll end up being a good tournament option just because he's completely off the beaten path at this point, and we know he can go out there and throw up 50 for like 6,400 on DraftKings.
So yeah, Nurkic was the only other guy that I was going to mention in this game. With McCollum, I honestly don't even think he's too cheap given the slate. I don't. I think normally you'd say, okay, that's a pretty good price point, but I'm just like, I'm okay not playing him, and if he goes off, then okay, fine. But I'm all right not playing him because on average you're getting like right around 30 fantasy points, and I think I can exceed that greatly from like literally 5 to 7 other guys in the 6 to 6,900 range. So
yeah, I mean, I'd like to be overweight on him. I don't think that's going to require getting a ton of exposure though.
Yeah, like 8% probably.
Right. I do think it's a really interesting pivot from Bledsoe on DraftKings in particular. It's a $100 price difference. They're both, shooting guard eligible there. And we know, I mean, I love Bledsoe tonight. Don't get me wrong. We'll talk about it. But we know that Bledsoe is perfectly capable of being inconsistent. And they're the same price. They're going to play similar minutes. They're going to have similar usage rates. And one's going to have a shit ton more ownership.
Yeah, no, I don't have an issue with that. My pivot from him was going to be Teague. If I'm still waiting to get a better idea on ownership, but it's just incredible that because of this news, this Lakers Minnesota game, and I know it's one that I'm probably a little higher on than you are in some spots, really less on the Lakers side. We'll get to that, but you're definitely going to see ownership decreased in a lot of games that had Giannis and Davis played would have been a whole lot higher. Let's talk Philly and Atlanta. This game, by the way, Portland and Indiana, 216 total. Pacers are 4-point favorites. I think it's competitive, though. Sixers are now an 11.5-point favorite, 231-point total at home against this Hawks team. Atlanta's defense actually hasn't played poorly to start the year, Adam. And it's not a huge surprise because guys like Bazemore and Taurean Prince are not bad wing defenders. They're both long guys that can get their hands in passing lanes. Like, that's not a huge surprise. But they're also a team that can just completely disappear offensively because outside of Trey Smith, and even he's jacking up a lot of threes, they don't have any guys that are competent at getting into the lane out and creating creating high efficiency scoring opportunities. Think about it, like Taurean Prince and Bazemore. I'm a big fan of Prince, but those guys aren't dudes you rely upon to get in there, get in amongst the trees, with big front courts and battle. I look at Joel Embiid here, and I think that first of all, Joel Embiid, if you take just fantasy point per game averages on this slate for everyone that is healthy, he leads the entire slate. Yet he's $10,000 on DraftKings, which in my opinion is still too cheap. And the reason I say that, he's playing 36 minutes per game. 36 minutes per game, has monster usage, is averaging basically 30 and 13 with 4 assists and 2.5 blocks. You give me 36 minutes of Embiid against the Hawks, and the problem is blowout, of course, but let's say he plays his normal minutes. 10K is a very, very easy price point for him to just demolish. He's done it countless times before with a lot less than 35 minutes.
I have Embiid projected as the top scorer on DraftKings tonight, so I'm right there.
So do I.
And it's a spot that I definitely want to get to. I had on the show with Josh today, I had said that I really liked Embiid, but that I didn't see myself getting to a lot of him because center is just a position that in general in tournaments, I like to kind of embrace volatility and pay to like the middle range with guys like Nurkic and Whiteside.
Load up on Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah, exactly. But with the way value is opened up on this slate, it's made it so I can, obviously get more stars and go more stars and scrubs. But it just makes me really want to maximize my, raw points with Embiid. And I have him projected for like 59, 60 DraftKings points. And with this game having an 11.5 point spread, I kind of, not that he'll be unowned, but I kind of think people will shy away from it. They generally do on spreads like that, especially on slates like this where ownership's already going to be very, very concentrated. So now I'm definitely looking to get quite a bit of Embiid into my lineups. The price tag, I agree, it's too cheap. Even if this game blows out, let's say it really blows out and Embiid only plays 3/4, there's such a good chance that it blew out because he put up 50 or 55 fantasy points. And at 10K, that's still, it's not, the best, but it's you can certainly live with it. So yeah, I really like Embiid a lot here. I like Simmons too. Have him projected as I think the 3rd or 4th highest scorer on the slate.
I like him a lot as well.
Yeah.
Before you address the rest of the game, I just want to address a comment. Jaden Wood says, "Too bad Embiid's on a back-to-back. They won't push him." Here's the thing: if this game is close, then I have zero worries at all about Joel Embiid on a back-to-back. He played that back-to-back. He faced Detroit. They went into overtime. He played 39 minutes. And the next day, they were blown out in the 4th quarter by Milwaukee, and Embiid still played 36 minutes. So they're not babying Joel Embiid this year at all. Now, they play Toronto tomorrow. Okay, if they go up early, like you said, he's probably going to have a lot to do with it. But if this game is, let's say, even 13 points going into the 4th quarter, I would be very surprised if Embiid sees minutes limited at all. His minute totals have been 37, 36, 39, 34, 33. That was a blowout. And 37, also a blowout on the opposite end. Brett Brown is not babying him. He was questionable with that ankle injury as well, which he suffered in practice, Adam. Ended up playing and seeing 37 minutes. So that's just no longer a concern for me. And I think it's unfounded now that he's fully healthy.
Yeah, people love finding reasons not to play Embiid, which is another reason that I'm pretty excited to get him in tonight when, people can look to the back-to-back, they can look to the spread, they can certainly find reasons if they so choose. So, I'm pretty excited to get to Embiid here. He's easily my favorite play from this game.
Agreed. Talk to me about the rest of this one, because I'll give you my Fultz take in a moment.
So I like Simmons. I'm not prioritizing him nearly as much as Embiid, but I like him. I think on the other side, Dwayne Dedmon's really interesting. I don't think he'll end up with much ownership because of all the stuff that's opened up. But he did play 26, almost 27 minutes in their last game. He is, splitting center minutes with Alex Len, but he's a better defender than Len. I would expect him to end up getting the better half of that timeshare at center. He's still pretty inexpensive. He can stretch the floor a little bit. He's not going to rely on, just scoring at the rim against Embiid. So it's certainly not someone I'd go to in cash, but I do think he's a pretty good tournament play.
Fair enough. So here's what I want to say on Markelle Fultz. Now, I haven't played the guy this year, but if you think this game is going to be a blowout, then you want to play Markelle Fultz. Now, Adam, you might look at me and scratch your head and say, "What the hell are you talking about?" He's a start. He's a start. Okay, he's a starter. He's also a starter that Brett Brown is doing everything he can to expedite the maturation process without having him cost them games. So let's take a look at the one game where this year where the Sixers have blown their opponent out. That was a Thursday night game or a Tuesday night game against the Bulls. Markelle Fultz played 4 short stints in the first half. He played 5 minutes, and then he played 3 minutes, and then in the second quarter he played 3, and then another 4. The second half, he comes in. He does not start. He comes in the second half with 5 minutes remaining and finishes out the entire game. Brett Brown wants him to run the offense in non-critical situations. I feel 100% certain of this. Now, Simmons came back for a short stint in the fourth quarter, but Markelle Fultz, if this is a blowout, just because he's a starter does not mean that he's going to hit the bench. If anything, it means that Redick goes to the bench and Fultz comes out there and probably finishes out the game. He played the most minutes of the season against the Bulls, 32. I could see him going upwards of 32 minutes if the Sixers blow them out. Now, that's an if, right? It's a big if. But if the Sixers blow out the Bulls, I feel very comfortable that Markelle Fultz gets 30-plus minutes, but also runs the offense with that second unit out there. Anything else?
No, I agree with you on that. I played him in that blowout against, I think it was Chicago, and it was pretty nice watching him torpedo my teams for 3 quarters and then get there in the fourth.
Yep. Another thing, he's actually been making hustle plays lately, something I think he was afraid to do last year. Drives per game, up there around 8 or 9, not great, but he is seeing a little bit, he seems a little bit more energized, but I'm not about to say Markelle Fultz is good. He's been a colossal disappointment. What I am saying is, what is he, 4,100 or so, 4,200? No one's going to touch this guy at 4,200. If he gives you 30 fantasy points across 30 minutes or 32 minutes, 31, he could produce less than a fantasy point per minute and still pay off in spades at that price. All right. Anything for you in Atlanta? I know you talked about it a little bit, but is there anything else we missed, or should we just keep it going here?
Dedmon's the one I like the most. You can certainly make an argument for guys like, Taurean Prince and Trae Young, especially if you're playing Embiid or Simmons and you really want the game to stay close. But when you factor in price on this slate, Dedmon's the one that really stands out to me.
For sure. Oh, by the way, Burn air account says don't have Fultz and Embiid in the same lineup. Maybe I that's a very good point. And if I think logic would dictate that, but I'm glad you point that out. It's definitely possible, like Adam said, that Embiid could go for 60 in 3 quarters and Fultz could still get his. But the correlation is definitely negative there for Fultz. If Embiid does well, really well, and plays a full game, Fultz probably won't. So glad you pointed that out, Burn.
Same goes for Simmons too.
So, of course, yeah, same goes for Simmons and really any high minute starters not named Fultz.
I kind of think that you should probably, unless you're intentionally bringing it back with guys from Atlanta, you should probably play one guy from the Sixers.
Agreed. Yeah. Absolutely agree with that. Which means this will be the game that goes 20 points over the total and stays competitive till the end.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. Sacramento, Miami, 220. When did you ever think you'd see a 226 over under for Miami and Sacramento?
Yeah, it still messes with my brain. People were talking about loving the Miami Sacramento game earlier, and I was just like, what the hell are you talking about? And then I look at it and say, oh yeah, there's a lot of good plays.
Yeah, well, go ahead. Let's start with Miami, because we'd seen Olynyk and Whiteside starting alongside each other with James Johnson out with the sports hernia. You have a bunch of 6'11" or 7-footers in the Sacramento front court, so it stands to reason that Olynyk, who's seen 29 and 30 minutes over his last two games, and Whiteside, who has seen 34 and 27 minutes. That one was a blowout. That's the one we loved him in. Uh, I think they could both see, I think you could get like 28 from Olynyk and 34 from Whiteside here in terms of minutes. It wouldn't surprise me against this Sacramento front court, but Miami is a 9.5 point favorite for what it's worth.
Yeah, I like both guys from the Miami front court here because everything like sites that I look at are still projecting Whiteside for like 27 or 28 minutes, which I think is completely wrong. If you're projecting, the game to stay close, he's pretty easily playing 33 or 34 minutes if it's competitive into the fourth quarter in a matchup here against Willie Cauley-Stein and a big Sacramento front court. So I like Whiteside a lot. He's someone that I'm going to be looking to be overweight on in tournaments for sure. Obviously, doesn't really fit very easily into a cash lineup, but in tournaments, one of my kind of favorite mid-range plays. And then Olynyk, again, he's sort of in that mold with Dwayne Dedmon, where when I did the show with Josh this morning, I thought Olynyk would probably be really popular, but because everyone's attention now is going to be on Milwaukee and on Toronto and on the Pelicans, you're going to see ownership really drop on Olynyk. And this, like you said, is a front court that they can really easily go with a Twin Towers approach, play Olynyk pushing 30 minutes again, whether it's against Bielitsa or Bagley, it doesn't really matter. Size-wise, it works out. So I think both of those guys are really good plays. They're easily my two favorite Miami plays. On FanDuel, Dragic is underpriced. On DraftKings, it's really tough to get to him, I think, given the other guys around him. But really, really like the front court here for Miami.
Me too. It's actually the only part of this game that I really have like ample interest in.
Yep.
Maybe I've said about De'Aaron Fox this season. I love that this is someone who is excelling in the pick and roll, because if you just look at point guards that play heavy pick and roll offense as the ball handler, generally you get good results, over the span of a season. They give you a higher upside just because of how often they have the ball in their hands. And De'Aaron Fox has the third most pick and roll attempts this year, 61% frequency. And he even put numbers up against Mike Conley, who has been one of the best pick and roll defenders for years now. But my point is, though, that playing De'Aaron Fox today does not make sense at his price. But I feel that way about most of Sacramento. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much feel the same way. It's not that I mind them. Like Bielitsa, I think at 5,300 is fair. I think Hield and Cauley-Stein's price tags are fair, but there's just so much to prioritize on the slate. I can't get there with the Sacramento guys.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's talk Brooklyn and New York then. This is a spot where the Knicks are favored by 1 at home. 216.5 point favorites. So another relatively low total. This is hardly even something I worry about much anymore. When you're up over 215, I mean, yeah, there's a difference between 240 like we have in Minnesota and 216. But nowadays, there's still going to be quite a bit of possessions to go around. Really curious to see where you're at here, because in today's deep dive, when I wrote the article, there were a bunch of players from this game that I considered featuring, but ended up just listing as honorable mentions because of everything that opened up. Like Tim Hardaway, who has literally taken 20 plus field goal attempts in 5 of 6 games and has a 30% usage rate to start the season. Or Karis LeVert, who was the only player in Brooklyn that averaged 30 minutes per game with, we know how Kenny Atkinson works. He's actually really trusted Karis LeVert. Even since Hollis Jefferson returned, his minutes have still averaged above 30, and he's getting up a ton of shots. Guys like him, and even someone like Cantor, who looks like will continue to come off the bench, and Jarrett Allen on the other side, whose defense has been, watch his defense going forward, been very good. Those guys to me are all players that it's like, yeah, I could see them having a really good game, but I just have a really difficult time prioritizing any of them.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And that's why this game's really appealing to me in tournaments, because I think that's the correct approach. And I think it's the popular one. I can't trust either of these teams in cash games. We don't even know for sure what lineup, at least as far as I've seen, the Knicks are going with, other than Cantor's coming off the bench. If we assume that it's the same lineup they went with against Golden State, it makes Mitchell Robinson an interesting play. It makes Noah Vonleh interesting.
For what it's worth, I saw that he still was planning on playing Cantor off the bench, and it might not.
Yeah. So I saw that. I just haven't seen
okay. Me neither. Yeah. Okay.
But the point is, like, there's still so many ways that this rotation can go that it makes everyone risky from a projectability standpoint. But there's no questioning the upside that Mitchell Robinson has against the Nets if he plays 28 minutes, or that Vonleh has against the Mets if he plays 26 minutes or something along those lines. Not to mention Tim Hardaway, who you mentioned the monster usage rate, and he's pretty clearly locked into big minutes no matter what. Not someone I'm prioritizing over like a Chris Middleton in cash, but certainly can pivot to him in tournaments and feel pretty good about the upside. So I like that. And then you mentioned Jared Allen and Karis LeVert, easily my favorite plays from Brooklyn. Allen's only 5,400 on DraftKings. He's pretty much locked into about 30 minutes a night. He's been playing reasonably well, has upside to do even better. And Karis LeVert, his minutes fluctuate. I think last game against Golden State, he played about 30. The game before that, he was on pace to play like 35. So it's tough to really trust him again, in cash games where you're trying to make an optimal lineup. But the guy's got like a 28% usage rate. He's got about a 23.5% expected assist percentage. He's contributing big time when he's on the floor, and it's not a bad matchup for him. So I like him quite a bit in tournaments because I expected his ownership to be pretty low.
Agreed. Jeremy Savage says, why are we talking about De'Aaron Fox? Because if I have information, I like to share it. But no, I'm not playing De'Aaron Fox today. Anything else from Brooklyn and New York that you want to? I think we're pretty much on the same page. You got secondary, tertiary guys here that are very capable of putting up numbers, and Hardaway's usage certain minutes certainly aren't in question.
Right.
Cantor, on the other hand, it's hard to say, but we know with Hardaway and LeVert that they're at least going to go out there, get 30 minutes or more, and jack up, in Hardaway's case, 18 to 25 shots.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Golden State and Chicago. I'm going to say one thing, and then I'll let you take over. You've talked quite a bit about Klay Thompson this year, just how cheap he is. And Dan Stratford mentioned it on the podcast this morning. So I was doing some digging. One thing I came across that was really interesting, because we know he's the third option on this team, but that generally doesn't mean that that's not a bad thing when you're the third option on the Warriors. But I'm looking over his numbers. He's averaging 2 fewer 3-point attempts than he did last year, 3.2 fewer threes than he did 2 seasons ago. And a lot of his upside came from the fact that when he would get hot, he'd get hot from beyond the arc, and he would just light it up, and especially give you those bonus points on DraftKings. Now, I'm not saying that number can't rise. I just find it very interesting that Klay Thompson last year, if you look at his shooting, was attempting 44.2% of his shots from three. This year, it's less than a third of his shots, 32%. And away more from like that mid-range area, that 14 or 13 to 19 foot area or 16 or so feet area that is kind of no man's land that I prefer you not to be shooting at. So step back a few feet, dude. That will help you a lot from a fantasy stance. Not that I should be giving the Warriors guidance, but you get my point from a fantasy sense.
Yeah, and I kind of don't expect that to continue because everyone knows that three-pointers are better than mid-range shots.
The Warriors are the ones that figured it out first,
Yeah. Yeah, and I do like Klay a lot tonight. Josh and I talked about it this morning. He's shooting like 19% from three this season. He's shooting well below his career average, 13.9% from three, I think. He's shooting well below. Yeah.
Wow.
He's shooting well below his career average overall as well. Like there's nowhere to go for him but up. The minutes are still there. And when he gets hot, we see him, like he can take over as the guy that just chucks up threes every time down the floor. We haven't seen it yet, but he'll do it, multiple times this year, most likely. This is a really good spot for him to do it against Chicago. The minutes are there, even in blowouts. It's more or less solidified because he usually starts the fourth quarter. So you might get, 32 or like 32 minutes instead of 35 or 36, but 5,600 on DraftKings, I think, is a really, really nice price for him. I like him a lot, especially as a pivot, another guy that you can use to like pivot away from Bledsoe or Middleton or whoever.
Yeah. I'm with you. I don't know how much I'm going to have there. This game right now, what's our total, or not the total? I don't really care about 228 Warriors by 11.5. I mean, the one benefit for Klay is that he does start fourth quarters and get that blowout run, at least some of it. But in terms of the game in general. Like, do you have interest in Levine? Do you have interest in Wendell Carter Jr., who since Felicia's returned has seen his minutes go to 18 and 22? Uh, are you targeting Jabari Parker, who, as we saw, didn't he got what 26 minutes in that ugly blowout against the Hornets, and then in a close game against Atlanta, or at least one that finished with the 12-point difference, saw 34 minutes. All of these guys are kind of question marks on this slate.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar to the Brooklyn game for me, where I don't trust anything in this game, but especially from the Chicago side. But the potential's there for really good fantasy outings. I mean, if you get another 34-ish minutes out of Jabari Parker at 5,800, there's a pretty good chance he smashes that price tag. Zach LaVine, I mean, if Chicago does stay in this game, it's going to be because of LaVine. So nothing that I am prioritizing, but I have no issue, being slightly overweight on these Chicago pieces. And from the Warriors, though, I do kind of like the idea of maybe forcing in like one of their guys. I have Durant projected for more points than LeBron, so I like him quite a bit. Steph Curry obviously can take over any game. Clay still at his price is my favorite guy from Golden State, but I do think it's a really good spot for the Warriors, and they probably won't really be that popular today.
Yeah, agreed. Nice to see that we already got 2 dislikes. I don't know. What did you do, Adam?
It's because the internet's still working.
Yeah, the internet's still working. As always, appreciate a thumbs up here for the free videos. We love providing you guys with content, and that's your little way of giving back to us. Just a little thumbs up there. Let's move. Let's keep it moving here. Is there anything else in this game? It's one that I have less interest in than normal.
Nope.
All right, Milwaukee and Toronto. No Kawhi, no Giannis Antetokounmpo, which means that we're going to spend some time on this game for sure. What game? What you tell me? What game you want to start on?
What?
Or I'm sorry, what position or team you want to start on?
Milwaukee.
Start on Milwaukee. All right. All right. Well, Middleton's played. God, Middleton's had great success without Giannis in the past. Let's take this in pieces because there hasn't been a lot of turnover in the backcourt and the wings. We can talk about DiVincenzo or whatever, but there hasn't been a lot of turnover. You still have the core pieces in Bledsoe, in Middleton, in Brogdon. No Jabari Parker, but he was to some extent an afterthought last year. But then in the front court, there is a little bit of turnover because you have Ilyasova, and then you have Brook Lopez. Whereas last year was like John Henson and Thon Maker soaking up a lot of the minutes, and one of the Zeller brothers. So let's start in the backcourt and the wings and work our way to the front court because there's a lot we can talk about here.
Yeah, so I mean, Bledsoe is 6,100 on DraftKings with multi-position eligibility. Makes it really easy to get him into lineups. I think makes, obviously for a really good cash option. About a 27% usage rate since joining the Bucks last year when he plays without Giannis. Even alongside Middleton, the usage is there for him. He gets assists. It's just, a high floor, high ceiling play, I think. Still not the best matchup against Toronto, even without Kawhi. I mean, it's still a solid defense. And that's something that I am paying attention to, assuming that we get a really high ownership projection on Bledsoe, just because there are so many options around him and a little bit cheaper that if his ownership's going to get too carried away, while I still like him, I'll be okay pivoting to other guys at lower ownership. But I do like him a lot. Middleton over that since the start of last year, overall without Giannis on the floor, has about a 31.5% usage rate, dips down to about 27.5%, 28% alongside Bledsoe, but that's still obviously really good for a guy who is available for less than $7,000 on DraftKings and is guard and forward eligible. So I expect, big minutes and a big game out of both of those guys. They'll both be core plays for me, definitely cash plays for me. And then I expect that barring some really, really high ownership projection, that there'll be core guys in tournaments too.
For sure. Yeah, Middleton this season has played 67 minutes without Giannis, has a monster 39% usage rate, 1.9 fantasy points per minute. But then you throw Bledsoe on the court with him, you have 46 minutes, 30% usage rate, and 1.52 DraftKings points per minute. Now, look, that's a small sample, but we do know that even going back to last season, like if you were to just go back to the start of 2017, take Giannis off the court, take Jabari off the court, leave Bledsoe on the court, you're still looking at really solid numbers, right? You're still looking at, what is it, almost 30% usage for Middleton, about around 1.2 fantasy points per minute. And I think that actually would increase even a bit more here. So I'm I'm with you. I like Middleton more than Bledsoe, and a reason that I mentioned to you before we started the show, it's not even from a projection standpoint, but a lot of this has to do also with the fact that I see point guard being deeper than small forward, where I can play Middleton on DraftKings.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
From an Ilyasova standpoint, we had questions on him, and we'll definitely talk about him. He's cheap. He's starting. There's a good chance that Ilyasova plays around 30 minutes today. And one of the things too about Ilyasova is that he's not really he's already been relatively productive with the minutes that he's been given. He's not a guy that's going to give you crazy numbers. But when you take Giannis's rebound off the court, Giannis has a 40% rebounding share when he's on the court. Not a rebounding rate, but he's collecting 40% of all of the team's rebounds when he's on the court. That's an insane number. And Ilyasova's played a decent amount alongside him. So, yeah, at 4,100, he's cheap enough to where if he gets 27 to 30 minutes, he's not going to kill you. That's where I stand on Ilyasova. What about you?
Yeah, I agree entirely. I have him projected for about 30 minutes here, and I agree that the rebounding should improve without Giannis on the floor for basically everyone, but especially for him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I do like
And
him.
Lopez can't rebound for shit either, even though it'll help him. But he's not. It's not like he's going to siphon up all of the ones that Giannis wasn't getting.
Right. Yeah. So I like Ilyasova, quite a bit at his price tag. There are a lot of options in that price range, but I do like him. I think he's a good play. Lopez is basically the same price too, and I like Lopez, but I think one thing to point out that maybe is a little bit concerning is it has to do with the stat that you had tweeted about the other day, how many wide open 3-point looks Brook
Yep.
Lopez has been getting. Without Giannis on the floor, I think that maybe you see a usage bump for Lopez, but probably a decrease in efficiency. That almost definitely a decrease in wide open looks. I think
No
maybe
doubt.
he could struggle a little bit. Tag, you know, is very risky. Like he doesn't have to be that good to outperform a $4,200 price tag. But I think it's worth noting that he probably does get worse looks in the spot.
No, you're 100% right. And for those of you wondering, the tweet of mine was just open. How many? The leading players with the most open 3-pointers per game, wide open, 6 or more feet away from the defender, and there were 3 Bucks in the top 10. Brolo was one of them. So yeah, no, you're definitely right about that. Brolo's a guy that can score in bunches, and with Giannis off the court, I could see the scenario right where he gets off to a really early start and they just kind of feed him. But there's also the possibility that that doesn't happen, and he just really doesn't shoot much because you still have Middleton and you still have Bledsoe. There's still guys that can score here. I'll put it simply like this. I think Lopez has a higher ceiling just because he's a better scorer. And if he racks up a game with like 4 or 5 blocks, which he's done, he has a higher ceiling than Ilyasova. But I actually think Ersan's a little bit safer just in terms of being able to get a little bit more safe peripheral stats here.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I also talking about the backcourt, completely forgot to mention Malcolm Brogdon because he's pretty boring, but I still have him projected for like 30, 31 DraftKings points at 45 or 4,600. So at the very least, he's a guy that I like in cash. Upside wise, it probably isn't that risky to play a handful of other guys in tournaments, but in cash, I just like the floor that you get from 35 minutes of Brogdon without Giannis.
What are you going to do when Fultz outscores Brogdon?
I mean, I agree with you on Fultz, so I'll probably have some.
No, I know. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
What about Toronto on the other side with no Kawhi Leonard, and Anunoby's out as well, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, this one, it's kind of a mess, and I'm interested to see exactly how it plays out. So obviously you get a usage boost for Kyle Lowry, small sample size, but without Leonard on the floor this year, he's up at about 28% usage compared to about 20.5% overall. So you get that, probably will be a bit less efficient, but he's going to get up a bunch of shots, and he's going to play, plenty of minutes. I think we're still waiting on news about Van Vliet and Wright, but
we are.
don't think that either one's going to be a viable option on this slate anyway. If they were both out, that may be a few more minutes for Kyle Lowry. But I do like Lowry. I like Danny Green. But where I think it gets really interesting is in the front court with Anunoby out. We have not seen Serge Ibaka play a single minute next to J-Val this year. So there was actually one game on Popcorn Machine against the Timberwolves where it looked like they had closed together, but Popcorn Machine had just messed up. And even in that game, Ibaka played 28, Valanciunas played 20. So we haven't seen Ibaka play any minutes at the 4 this season. And we've seen Anunoby and Pascal Siakam exclusively playing the 4. So I have Siakam projected for like 36 minutes here, with the rest going to whoever, CJ Miles or something like that, somebody useless. So I think that Siakam at 3,900, it's not a guy that people play very often, but I think that he should see a lot of minutes here in a spot that really isn't bad. Like from a rebounding perspective, he should be able to get a lot of rebounds. So I do like Pascal Siakam quite a bit.
All right. I like Joval quite a bit in tournaments, but I always do.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, from a per minute basis, he's just a flat out stud. Like, it's a shame that he got another coach once Casey was gone that plays him less minutes than Tibbs. I understand the guy is flawed, but the funny thing is there are so many worse centers in the league than Valanciunas that play a lot more minutes. And, he's just one of those guys that can have those blow up games. And Brook Lopez is a decent shot blocker, but that doesn't mean that he's a great defender. And Joval does have like legitimate 18 double-double upside here. And once again, I think there's a chance that he could play. We said that in his last game, we said that we thought he'd play a season high in minutes, right? He did. It was 22. It wasn't 30, but it was still a season high in minutes. Well, I wouldn't be surprised to see him play 23 against Milwaukee, which could still result in like 40 fantasy points. He just always has a chance to blow the top off of it because of his upside.
Yeah, agreed. It does make it hard to ever see him getting a lot of minutes since Ibaka's not playing anytime at the 4.
For sure.
But he's cheap enough that he can certainly get there in 20, 22 minutes, especially against this front court. Although if he doesn't start, his time will primarily be against Henson instead of Lopez.
What will end up happening is that we're going to get Joval's going to drop to like 4,700, not, maybe a week or two from now. And then it's going to be really hard not to play him.
Yeah.
We saw it a lot last year where the moment he fell to 4,500 or something, you're talking about someone that even with 20 minutes per game is oftentimes not disappointing you whatsoever. Let's talk about. We pretty much got to the whole team. I won't waste any time on Siakam. You already talked about him, and we have the same opinion on all of these guys so far. I think we'll start to have a little bit of a disagreement once we get to the next game. But in terms of Kyle Lowry, where are you ranking him just in terms of prioritizing? Because he's definitely deferred to Leonard this year, but I think that kind of makes things interesting too. We look at Lowry immediately without Leonard and say, all right, lock it up, perfect spot. But you also at least have to look at it from a sense of sometimes better players being on the court help point guards like Kyle Lowry. Just say.
Yeah. I certainly expect it could have a negative effect on his efficiency, especially because, again, they don't have Giannis, but this team does still have plenty of length. They can still make life, pretty difficult for, especially in this case, the sole scorer that's still on the floor. So I'm probably just going to play the ownership game with Lowry. Like I'm going to play him in cash because I think $8,000 for a guy in his spot is really cheap. But in tournaments, I'm looking at the ownership percentages now, trying to see where he is. I'll probably play like 15, 20%. The last time Leonard was out, he was only 12 or 13% owned, and that was in a better matchup against the Wizards. On this slate, though, there's just so much to like for less at point guard, and then even a little bit more. Like you have Ben Simmons. We talked about other guys like Lillard and stuff too. It's just such a deep position that I don't want to just jam a bunch of Lowry in tournaments. But I don't have a problem with him. I do think that offenses.
I agree. Absolutely. And Danny Green, people forget that Danny Green like is a good perimeter defender. I don't know if you see Danny on Lowry though.
I wouldn't. Well, no, they're on the same team.
I'm sorry.
I was like,
Uh, God, I don't know. I don't think we see Danny Green on. Oh, you know what? I think I just mixed it up entirely. um, let me back to the Lowry thing. I also want to point out though that even though I feel like there could be instances where Lowry or Leonard being off the court might not help Lowry. The numbers say this year that it has. Okay. So I'll go with the numbers. Like his usage is and it's a small sample, but his usage is way higher and his per minute production without Leonard is way higher. So I'm not saying that Lowry is a bad play at all. No, that's crazy. But it's definitely a spot where I could see him underwhelm a little bit. Not even at 8K, just because once again, there's a lot at point guard.
yeah, exactly. It's not going to be that tough to find that. I'd be surprised if Lowry's like a guy that you have to have in your lineup to win tournaments tonight.
Agreed. Somebody said the stream was lagging. Hoping that it. I think we're back. Yeah, I think we're good here. Anything else on this one? There's a whole lot, so I wanted to make sure we hit on all of it. I'm sure we'll get some questions about old Storm and Norman.
I do have him projected for about 30 minutes tonight. So I have him projected for like 21, 22 DraftKings points, which certainly means that I would expect to have at least a little bit of feels kind of unnecessary in cash games.
It does. He is really cheap though. Like
Yep.
I don't think it's the craziest play. And if you remember last year with DeRozan off the court, Norman Powell was, or not even just last year, but in general, with DeRozan off the court, people. I remember when Lowry would be out, or like another starter, a small forward, whoever it was, Anunoby, whatever was out, and Powell would start alongside DeRozan, and people were like, "Oh, you got to play Powell." No, I mean Powell is useless unless he's actually getting some volume, right? And last year he did have 22.5% usage. With DeRozan off the court, but it's not a surprise that his per minute production was at 0.82 because unless he scores 20 real points, Norman Powell will have a tough time getting you there. But no, Adam, honestly, I think if you're playing tournament, you're playing a decent amount of lineups. At 32, if he does get around 30 minutes, it's not the easiest matchup because the Bucks still have quality perimeter defense. But at 3,200, he could get you where you go if his shooting is on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference, and it's something that we talk about every year. There's a big difference between like a 4,400 player and a 3,200 player. It's just like, and people just talk about cheap value as the same thing, but I just think there's a huge difference between 21, 22 points at 3K is actually pretty good, whereas if you get like 25 at 4K, normally you're still kind of behind.
Right, exactly. All right, we got 3 games to go here. Then we'll turn it over to the live before lock boys, and they'll take you up to 7 p.m. Eastern time. Minnesota and the Lakers. This is one that a lot of hype early on, like last night, and then it died down a lot because, well, obvious reasons. Giannis is out, Davis is out. Elfrid Payton, even being out, makes a difference. I'm sure there's more that I've forgotten. 240.5 total, 240.5 point total. Lakers are 2-point favorites, which just kind of goes to show you this team has not been very impressive, even with LeBron, because Minnesota has been dreadful at times. That last game was one of the worst performances you could see from a team effort standpoint. But there's just no way that I can overlook Jeff Teague at $5,300, Adam. First of all, he's $200 more than Derrick Rose on DraftKings. Teague has played 30 minutes in every single competitive game they've played this year. He leads the team in potential assist with 13. That's a really strong number for someone like Jeff Teague. He leads Minnesota in touches too. And how about this? I mentioned this to you today, and I think you were surprised as well. He is 7th in the entire league with 15.5 drives per game. That's wild for Jeff Teague.
Yeah, there's a lot to like here. And then obviously it's a fast-paced game too. You have, the Lakers looking to play fast all season long. You have Minnesota in the top 10 in pace so far. it's not that I expect like a ton of usage out of Teague, but I just think the price tag's way, way too cheap for him. So yeah, he's almost definitely gonna be my highest owned Timberwolf.
Chadwick Richardson says Teague will fail you. Chadwick, you might not be wrong, but at 5,300, I'm willing to take the risk. He says Teague owes me his left kidney. I think Teague's done Chadwick dirty in the past. But listen, at 5,300, 20% usage, team leading potential assists, team leading touches, all of the stuff that I'm looking for in a game that is no doubt going to see a lot of scoring, a ton of possessions. Lakers defense is what, bottom 8. Minnesota's bottom 7. Both of these teams play at a top 10 pace. At 5,300, man, that's just really cheap for a dude that's playing 30, 33 minutes in competitive games and is actually handling the ball more than you would expect considering his teammates. Oh, and even if someone says Wiggins will be back, Wiggins doesn't really affect Jeff Teague all that much because he's just spotting up at this point and maybe a drive here and there.
Yeah, I mean, Wiggins doesn't pick up assists. He doesn't generate assists for Teague. It's kind of just like
Right.
a guy that's going to chuck up some shots at some point.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Teague might generate assists for him, but that's about it. There's my rant on Teague. Talk to me about the rest of this Minnesota team.
So yeah, I'm with you on Teague. Butler, I think we disagree a little bit. It's not that I dislike Butler or the spot for him or anything. I mean, obviously he's capable of going off here, but he's projected to be highly owned. I don't think, maybe it comes down a little bit once our ownership projections are rerun with more recent news. But he's ever since that first game when he got up 23 shots, he's taken like 12, 12, 11, 12 like field goal attempts. He's had usage rates down in the last game. He was in the teens. Before that, he's been down around, like 22, 23%. And I think shooting guard is just such a deep position today. There's obvious risks associated with these guys, but Zach LaVine's going to go out there and chuck up shots. Obviously, Drew Holiday's in a great spot. DeMar DeRozan's a little more expensive, but the usage is going to be there for him, for Oladipo, for Middleton, for Hardaway. Like, it's such a deep position that I don't really want to pay one of the more expensive price tags for a guy who hasn't really been as involved offensively as I thought he would this year. Obviously there's stuff going on around that, as well. And especially if people are, if he's going to be one of the more popular players on the slate, I would rather just kind of spread my exposure out to all these other high upside guys.
Yeah, no, look, Butler was one of those guys that I had more interest in once I thought that we were going to see ownership come away from this game. You're seeing that he's still projected for reasonably high ownership. And I'm just looking in chat, and a lot of chat is on Butler. So that, depending on popularity, I actually would like him less if he was super popular. I thought it would take some away from it. I think Butler can definitely have a good game. Like, I think he can have a very solid game, but I also don't see the need as much as I did earlier today. I actually liked him a lot more earlier than I did now. Teague is my top play, I think, actually from this game, just because of his price point.
Yeah, I agree.
What about the other side? Ingram returns, so now you just have this bouillabaisse of production. You don't know really where it's coming from. Obviously LeBron's going to produce, but you're not getting a discount at all on LeBron. And look, can LeBron go out there and drop 80? Yeah, obviously he can. But I don't know, it just feels really tough to say, all right, I'm going to pay 11-4 for LeBron on this slate.
Yeah, it's tough to really love any of the Lakers here. I probably will force some LeBron in tournaments, but it's not going to be a ton because, like I said, I have Durant projected for more points at a cheaper price. I have Ben Simmons in the same range. And then there's a bunch of cheap guys that I can go to as well, especially at power forward where he's eligible on DraftKings. Ingram coming back, Ingram and Rondo, but Ingram in particular just kind of muddies everything because it's another ball handler. It's another guy who's going to get up shots, but he doesn't have a high usage rate or a ton of assists this year, enough to where I really want to play him, especially with everything that's opened up. That's something that I've come down on him a lot since this morning. But it still, is a guy that's going to be out there and taking touches away from other guys. LeBron now has to deal with Ball, with Rondo, and with Ingram running the offense, at least for, little stretches. And then, so it's kind of just like a downgrade on everybody. But then it also, I think, even downgrades JaVale McGee, because before you had Kyle Kuzma having to play a bunch of minutes on the wing, and you had Jonathan Williams as the backup center, and it was pretty easy to say, okay, McGee's going to play as many minutes as he can because his backup is Jonathan Williams, and we're not too concerned about getting him his minutes. He's going to just play what he plays. But now you have Kyle Kuzma, I would assume, going back to being the backup center behind McGee, and Kuzma's almost definitely going to play in that 30 to 32 minute range, which means that McGee doesn't really have the freedom to play like 30 plus minutes anymore, and he's probably going to play like 26 with a rising price tag. So it just makes it really difficult for me to like anyone on this Lakers team.
Yeah, I'm with you. Marco asks Lowry or Levine. I'm going Lowry here, just a safer play
Definitely
overall.
going Lowry and Cash. I could certainly see going Levine in tournaments because they have the same ceiling, and Levine's going to be lower owned.
I see why Jeremy has Savage as his either last name or after his name. He just likes shitting on people. He's just talking shit on everybody. Welcome, Jeremy. Glad to have you in chat, my dude. Let's move on if you want. I mean, we can stay on this game if there's anything else you want to talk about, but I think it's center. I don't mind going away from McGee, even though I've loved him this whole year and I have no issues with it. I don't really know if there's anybody else I stand by here outside of Teague and some Butler.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much where I am.
All right. Dallas and San Antonio. Dennis Smith Jr. is way cheaper than you would have expected. He's down to 5,500 on DraftKings. He's still got a 25% usage rate this season. He's 64 on FanDuel. The Dennis Smith is one of those guys that's due for positive regression, which is funny because last year he was due for a lot of negative regression at the start of his rookie season, and it hit him. It hit him quickly. But I think you're going to start seeing quality numbers going forward, and we already are starting to. But really, right now, all of this depends on whether or not Luka Doncic is active or not, because he's 6,600. He's been kind of a jack of all trades type producer for the Mavericks, and now he's questionable to play against the San Antonio team that ranks dead last in defensive efficiency, can't defend the rim, can't defend in transition, can't prevent penetration to the rim. Like it's not a good San Antonio defense.
Yeah, I mean, I like Luka if he does play. I like Smith if Luka plays. I like Smith even more if he doesn't, because I think it solidifies Smith's minutes even more, probably pushes him up closer to like the 36-minute mark, because I've gotten the impression that they don't want to play Barea big minutes. And if you're not going to just give a bunch of Luka's minutes to Barea, you're going to have to give some to Dennis Smith Jr. Plus, I think it's going to end up being a pretty big San Antonio backcourt, and it's going to be weird to really get a lot of minutes, I think, from like Jalen Brunson and Barea side by side or anything. So I'll feel better about Smith's minutes if Luka's out. Obviously, he'll have the ball in his hands more as well. But either way, I think at a $5,500 price tag, you kind of have to like him in this spot against a weak Spurs defense, like you said. If Luka's out, I think it does just kind of boost everyone else too, though. Wes Matthews, Harrison Barnes, I think both become stronger plays. And I think it's a pretty decent spot for DeAndre Jordan coming off of a really big game last night. I haven't seen anything, but I'm expecting that Jakob Poeltl rejoins the rotation for the Spurs tonight, just because of the matchup. So I would expect that you get Jordan against Poeltl and Jordan against Pau Gasol, which neither one is overly concerning to me.
Yeah, not at all, dude. The turtle's my dude. What needs to happen is Pop needs to start giving Jakob Poeltl more minutes. It's time. It's time to seriously, the turtle needs some action, baby. Let him out of his shell.
He played his way straight to the bench.
I know. I know, but it's early, man. It's early. I guess what I'm saying is, are you talking about Poeltl or Burton? Because Burton started that last game, got 9 minutes, and then finished the game with 13 minutes, and Rudy Gay started the second half.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about Poeltl. He started like the first or second game of the season, and then immediately started losing playing time.
Yeah, it didn't work out too well. I think it was the second game where he didn't take a single shot.
Yeah.
So that's good. But then with Pau Gasol, like it's funny because he's still a +1 per minute guy because he's Pau Gasol, but you haven't heard him talked about once this year because he's not going to play. He played 23 minutes in the opener, and then outside of that, he hasn't played more than 18.
Yeah, it's just really tough because he's clearly just not getting the minutes.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that if he did, he would still like if Powell playing 30 minutes a game would be amazing for fantasy because the Spurs would become even worse on defense because he's a human pylon, but then he'd still give you like 40 fantasy points a game.
Right. He'd still be a great DFS player.
Oh yeah. Yeah, look, the guy can still score and he's still going to get some boards, a couple blocks, but then you literally just you could slow dribble around him and he in slow motion. Kyle Anderson could
Luka Doncic could.
Luka Doncic, yeah. But the Dallas game definitely depends. I think Doncic plays. Um, if he does, I do really like that price point. I think it's a great spot against San Antonio. San Antonio is allowing the third most points per possession to ball handlers in the pick and roll, and they're allowing the second most points in transition this year. No surprise. Doncic is very a capable player as a ball handler in the pick and roll, and he's a very capable player in transition. So I wouldn't let the pace dissuade you. This is actually a very good matchup for him from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Anything else you got on this?
No. I like the Mavs more than Vegas does.
So do I. Agree. And well, I guess did you mention DeRozan or Aldridge? I'm just
they're both secondary plays for me. There's no denying their ceilings, but
yeah.
they're just at price points I don't really like.
The price point's difficult. Yeah, DeRozan coming off that 62. He's got some monster games this year already.
Yeah, the assists are there. The usage is there. He's another guy that if he's going to be lower owned than Butler, I would like to find the money for him.
Totally agree with that, 100%. Because Butler from a usage standpoint is even last year. You're talking about like 23, 25%. Aldridge and DeRozan are two guys that almost every night are going to go out there and jack up between like 15 and 22 shots. Those are the two guys. You don't even have Danny Green's 3-point, corner threes anymore. So that makes a big difference. Aldridge this year, 31% usage, or DeRozan 31% usage, and Aldridge has to be up there as well. He's at what is he at? 30. He's at 27, but I even expect that to improve. So, all right, let's move on. We'll get out of here by 6:00. New Orleans and Denver, no Anthony Davis, no Elfrid Payton. Since we're running short on time, I'll throw it over to you. Give us the breakdown on how this works out with no Davis and no Elf, and Julius Randle expected to play.
Still a guessing game in the backcourt between, I think, Ian Clark, Frank Jackson, and Tim Frazier. My somewhat educated guess is that Frazier is the one that doesn't actually get minutes here. If you look at the last game they played, when Peyton got hurt, Ian Clark subbed in immediately, played with the starters. He came out and was replaced by Frank Jackson, who had also gotten run in the first half. And then Tim Frazier played like the fourth quarter alongside Frank Jackson in a blowout. So I'm guessing that the pecking order is Clark, Jackson, and then Frazier. I don't know who will start. I don't know if Clark maintains his role off the bench or if he moves into the starting lineup. Either way, I feel a little more confident in Clark's minutes being there just because he's ahead of Jackson in the rotation as is. He's been around for a few years. We know what we're getting with him. He does have a 22% usage rate without Peyton or Davis on the floor. Granted, that's probably a lot without Drew Holiday as well. But I feel like he's a little bit safer. I think Frank Jackson certainly has upside. He's a guy that'll go out there and shoot, but he's also very raw and very capable of disappearing. So I don't feel nearly as, not that I feel super confident in either one, but I prefer Clark to Jackson. But I really prefer the guys that are actually like good at basketball. You have Mirotic probably with a 29, 30% usage rate in the spot. Julius Randle, as long as he cannot foul Jokic, should be in line for a really good game in terms of assists and in terms of rebounding and scoring. Drew Holiday, I've projected to play about 40 minutes here, and I think should see plenty of assist opportunities. Without all these guys on the floor since last year, you're looking at a 27.5% usage rate, a 40% assist percentage, and he's multi-position eligible and less than 7K on DraftKings. Etuan Moore, I think, also sees a bump in usage. He's only $4,000, so I have quite a bit of interest in him as well.
Yeah, just a quick note on Mirotic. Last year with Davis, Cousins, and Rondo, I'm just going to use him as a placeholder for Peyton because they're similar in terms of not high shot volume, but can dish out assists off the court. He led the team in usage, around 25%. And if you look at last game, right, where Davis was out, if you look at the game flow on Popcorn Machine, Mirotic played 28.2 minutes and didn't play the final 14 minutes of the game, Adam. So like he was on pace to play 35 or more minutes in that game.
Yeah, I've Mirotic projected for about 36 here, and I wouldn't be shocked if he played more than that.
Yeah, and Randall's producing at a high clip this season. It's just I wonder how much of last game was the blowout plus the injury. Is he fine now? Is Gentry going to limit him? Gentry was a coach that we all hated for a while, but now I look at Gentry and I don't hate him nearly as much. And I think if Randall's healthy and fine and this game's close, then I expect him to get the minutes. I like Jokic a lot on the other side. This is a center that, unlike many others, leads his team in usage, leads his team in assist rate, in total rebound rate, in touches, in potential assists, in rebounding chances, literally everything. So it's very hard to ever look at Jokic as a bad play, especially when Davis is off the court. Anything else here?
Yeah, I like the rest of the Nuggets too. I like Harris. I like Murray. I like Monte Morris, who's
I'm not as high on Murray. I think he gets the Holiday treatment.
Murray's just. I mean, he played backup point guard last game too. Like he just was on the floor so much. He was out there with the second unit. I think he plays mid-30s in minutes.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I don't know. I like this game quite a bit. Obviously.
I agree. All right, really, really quickly. And by the way, before we head out, stick around for Live Before Lock and hit us with a like. Hit that thumbs up button and subscribe, bro. God, I hate when I sound like that, right? It just makes you sound like a total asshole. But we do appreciate it. Okay, real quick. Top point guards, go.
Lowry, Bledsoe, Teague, Smith.
Lowry, Bledsoe, and Teague for me as well. And Dennis Smith Jr. Shooting guards for me, Holiday, Doncic, Brogdon, and I think Fultz is a tournament play only if you're not playing Embiid. And I was going to say Middleton for small forward. Go ahead.
Same guys you said, but I will also throw in Klay Thompson.
Small forward.
LeBron, Durant, Simmons, Mirotic.
Yeah, I'm using Middleton and Mirotic here. I think you could talk Tim Hardaway as well. And then obviously, yeah, LeBron if you wanted to pay up for him. Power forward, Ilyasova, Randall, Olynyk. I don't see myself paying a ton here unless it's one of these MPE guys.
Yeah, it's a spot that I want to pay down to for the most part. Ilyasova, Siakam, Olynyk. I like all those guys.
All right, and quickly,
3,400 too.
All right, center.
Nurkic, Whiteside, Embiid, Jokic, Randall.
All right, Embiid, Jokic. I think Lopez is fine, but I like Whiteside, Nurkic as tournament plays, Jared Allen as well. Hit us up on Twitter if you have any questions. Also in Slack, you know where to find us. All right, fellas, have a great one. Good luck tonight. Stick around for Live Before Lock. Adam and I will see you back here tomorrow.